I bought this place in 2002, and we opened the doors in 2003. So I've been chef owner for the last 10 years now.
Yeah.
So it's been 10 years.
Great. And was it here that you got Michelin star?
First time I got my Michelin star when I was a head chef at Tamrin, where I worked for almost 9 years, and then I got it here as well.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And what kind of, I mean, obviously, what books had you done before?
I've done, this is my third book which has come out. The first book was Indian Essence, second book was Fish Indian Style, and then third book which has just come out, Atul's Curries of the World.
Okay.
So, and plus I have contributed, I think, maybe more than a dozen books.
Yeah.
Just supplied the recipe or helped support the charity for many things.
And has it always been Indian food that you've cooked, or have you varied across from restaurant to restaurant?
Professionally, I have cooked. After coming to London, I have cooked only Indian food, but before coming to London, I trained as a chef, not as an Indian chef. So, though I am seen as the iconic Indian chef now, and the irony is, I trained as a French chef.
Yeah.
I was running the French fine dining restaurant in Delhi. I was working under a French chef to run that. And I've trained in various principles. I have trained in Japanese, Thai, Italian, Chinese. So in India, the format is slightly different when you train to be a chef. You are put through different cuisines to make you a kind of wholesome chef. And then later in life, you can choose which one you want to take and cook as professionally.
And when you came to London, what was it that made you decide to pursue the Indian path?
Actually, I was brought in London as an Indian chef.
Okay.
So my job was, Tamrin was opening and they had headhunted me. They wanted me to cook Indian food.
Okay.
So that's how I came. And then I thought, yeah, I actually enjoyed doing my own food. So might as well stay with it, and I never bothered changing it after that.
And what do you think of the kind of state of Indian food in London at the moment? I mean, obviously it does seem to be changing in terms of...
It has changed a lot. 20 years ago when I arrived here in 1994, I think there were dark ages of Indian food, really speaking. There were the curry houses everywhere. I wouldn't say bad, but that's what the image of Indian food was, and that's how people liked it that time. Michelin star, forget it. It was not even discussed those days. Michelin star for the curry houses, forget it.
Yeah.
So I think that changed everything. In 2001, I got the first Michelin star, and that kind of brought Indian food into limelight and just changed the setting totally.
Yeah.
More and more smart Indian restaurants opened after that. People got more confidence, pushing the boundary and taking the cuisine to a newer height. And I think we are 6 Indian restaurants with Michelin stars. I think that makes us better than Italians, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't realise that.
I think we are two more than Italy. Italy, the 4 or 5, only 5 Italian restaurants, which is amazing.
Yeah.
We are not a European cuisine, but we are such a big favorite, and Michelin have come out recognizing us that we do a good job.
That's fantastic. So it hasn't just been about a return to kind of authenticity and saying, actually, this is what we cook in India. It's also been about taking the cuisine.
For me, authenticity has got. I think authenticity is a very time-bound thing. If you're looking into the Victorian era, what was authentic food at that time, it will be very different authentic food in today's time.
Yeah.
So, and when you throw that context on Indian food, it becomes even more difficult because 1.2 billion people, 32 different states, 29 different languages, I don't know how many more dialects, different culinary ethos, and name any religion in the world and India has it. Everyone is kind of exerting their pressure on the cuisine and the culture.
Yeah.
That makes it even more complex. So there is actually nothing called Indian cuisine. You cannot describe Indian cuisine.
Because it's such a vast...
It's such a vast country. If I take tandoori chicken from Punjab and take it to South India and show it to the people of South India and say, do you think this is authentic Indian food? They say, really? No.
Yeah.
How about my rice pancake dosas and idlis, which are more authentic to us? And they are not at all authentic to people in the East. So it's a very complex issue. Indian food is just not as simple to describe. So I find it very difficult. So I leave it there. So you know what? Unity, diversity, they're all Indian cuisines. So much so that I don't even see any difference between Pakistani food and the Bangladeshi food and the Nepalese food and the Sri Lankan food. Because before 1947, it was all part of India. For many years, 200 plus years. Just because we have made the borders, the cuisine should become different. Why? To me, it remains Indian subcontinental cuisine, and that's how I see it.
Yeah. And is that what you tend to cook?
That's what I tend to do, and my cuisine now it's termed as British Indian cuisine. It's become even more complex,
Yeah.
and purely because I'm a kind of guy living in India. It's a secular country. For many years I didn't even realize that I was a Hindu boy. My parents forgot to tell us because we celebrated everything. Every religion's festivals were celebrated in our house as well, and that was done purposely so that we absorb more Indianism than anything else. After coming here, I find pretty much home, to be honest, because it's a similar kind of country.
Yeah.
We celebrate everything. We celebrate everyone's joy, and we weep on everyone's sorrow as well. So we become part of the good society. And I have embraced that Britishness into my food as well.
Yeah.
And, I've taken upon that it doesn't have to be Indian. I don't have to sit on fence. I do cook with Indian influence, but my ingredients are derived from British British oils,
Yeah.
and that's how I see it. And I do seasonal food. I do what is best of British, and I try to infuse it with Indian ethos.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you source,
Yeah,
fairly
everything locally.
and that's
Everything is
brilliant.
done locally. I hate buying anything other than my spices, which I can't buy, unfortunately, yet. You never know, in 1,000 years that might change.
Yeah. Yeah, climate change, maybe. So, well, actually, one of my questions about the book was about the ingredients that appear in it. Are there any in there where you think people would struggle to get them?
The ingredients. There were some ingredients, but you know what? This is such a fantastic country. Stroke London as a city, as an amazing place. Plus, we have so many web order companies, internet order companies, which can provide you with pretty much every ingredient you want. Apart from some of the things like wildebeest meat, kudu meat, and all that, you do get it in London and in UK as well. Or you can get it on the web order as well. But they're kind of little rare. So I've always said you can substitute it with good spring lamb, or you can use mutton. Should you wish, you can use just the pork would be as good. Aylesbury duck instead of XYZ. So I have kind of suggested on my recipes. And in terms of spices, I think you get pretty much here everything. Pretty much. I can't think of yeah. There are actually fantastic spice shops. There's one very recently I was introduced to a spice shop in Bath. And while writing the book, that shop became very helpful because I ordered so many samples from them. I said, you know what, I really want to explore it.
Yeah.
And that kind of inspired me to write more about spice blends. So if you go through the book at the end, it says foundations, and it has got, I think 30 or 40 different types of spice blends I've created.
Oh, wow.
And people can actually use it. Okay? And I just say that this is used in this part of the world, but it doesn't mean that you can't use it with any other cuisine. You can push the boundaries and see what you can do with it. It just gives people a few new ideas to think about.
So it's a book not just of recipes, but sort of ideas that
Absolutely.
you can go and create.
Absolutely.
And what did you find were the key differences between curries, according to geography and nationality? Did you find there were many, or?
There are, obviously, it's geographically, whatever Mother Nature gives you, you cook with that. That's what it comes to. For example, if you're talking about Far Eastern curries, the immediate accompaniment of curries would be rice. You move down to Africa, Eastern Africa or South Africa, the immediate accompaniment is mashed banana, the plantain, they call it plantains, the raw banana, cooked raw banana, or maize flour, cornmeal flour, not corn flour, cornmeal flour.
Okay.
So, and then you come towards, let's say, UAE stroke, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, you suddenly find a lot of wheat being grown, so you find a lot of bread. You come to United Kingdom, you find a lot of potatoes being used in the cooking. So it varies. But in terms of curry as a character, some people like using more fish because they're coastal towns, some people like using more meat because they're landlocked. Some people would like to use vegetarian food because those are their religious ethos.
Yeah.
So But one thing remains, one thing they have in common is they use plenty of spices
Yeah.
to create their curries.
And what gave you the idea kind of to do this book and to amalgamate all the curries of the world into one?
It actually started from my travels, and as I did a bit of TV work and I got invited to different parts of the world, for my own learning also I traveled. And wherever I went, I saw there were one form of curries or not available everywhere. In even a place like Brazil, they had stews which can be termed as curries, which were using plenty of spices. And it makes sense because it was Portuguese ships who were stopping at Brazil while sailing to India. They would go that way and go to the Cape of Good Hope across Africa, because that time Suez Canal wasn't there.
Yeah.
Everybody had to go through Africa. So they would make their stop in Brazil and then trail across, stop again in Namibia or somewhere, and then come back towards India. So, and they would follow the same route back. And hence the spices and the ingredients were made to travel with them and dropped in places. And that's how all the flavors kind of, if you connect the dots, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So things like tomatoes, chilies, all these things arrived through Portuguese from Africa and Brazil to India.
Oh wow.
We didn't have red chilies before Portuguese came to India. It's only about 400 years old. It's funny that you look at Indian food and you think of red chilies, but actually red chilies are very new to us.
Yeah.
We used black pepper before that. So, and there are fruits like, there's a fruit called chiku. There are only 2 places in the world I have found that. Obviously Mexico has it now, but Brazil and India. And nowhere else people eat that fruit. So it makes sense that it came through Portuguese. It's a native Brazilian fruit. So everywhere, wherever sailors went, they connected the continents through influences and flavors. And I think that's what curry also got, basically. Wherever spices went, the curries were created.
And so there must be some spices that are unique to certain places that they...
Definitely there are, but they do exist in one form or other in different parts of the world as well, as Mother Nature would have intended, or it has so happened that human interference has done that. Like chilies in Brazil, for example, are very different to chilies in India, however they are chilies.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, the work is absolutely same. So I came across some chilies in Brazil which are green and they're like small this time, bell pepper shaped. And you're not allowed to touch it with your finger as well because it's really hard. So they pluck it and they put it in the oil. And that oil, they use that oil slowly in their cooking because that becomes such a hugely chili flavored oil.
Wow.
And that chili is really hot. You can reach the rocket by having a bite to it. I mean, you reach the moon without the rocket, I mean. So it's amazing that how tiny ingredients have slowly traversed through the world or migrated from one place to the other, leaving their impact and then creating a new one on the new destination.
It must have been quite a lesson in history as well.
It is. It was very, very fascinating for me to read through, especially doing Africa. That kind of opened my mind that how curries have traveled there. Africans, not generally known for their curries, but British Empire, wherever they went, they took their workers with them. So, and it's politically, it's absolutely incorrect. It's not right to say this, but in some of the reports I read, it said they couldn't make Chinese people work harder, so they relied on Indian workers because they could work harder on very less wages and less food. It was all about that during that time. So that's how there were more Indians in Africa than Chinese, because they became the choice of labor. Even when they went to Far East, they took more Indians. Hence, that demonstrates the presence of Indians in Malaysia, Indonesia, and all those places. So they went through British Raj, and because Indian laborers were used to of their own kind of food, they would cook with the local ingredients, and obviously Africans learned from them also. A new kind of cuisine came out of it, which became Eastern African cuisine. And for many years before the British spice trade started, Arabs were trading on African coast anyway with the spices. They used to bring in spices. At least they used to stop by before they would come all the way to Venice to drop the load and buy whatever goods they would, and then sail back again on their doughs.
Yeah.
So that explains that how small things have trickled through and given the flavors,
Yeah.
curry flavors to the world.
So is curry kind of essentially an Indian invention, do you think, in a way that's travelled round, or?
You know, looking back, I would say, I think it might have all started from India, because that's the kind of original food there. But the way it has travelled out, originally due to the spice trade only, and then later with empire. I think it has created its own image in every country it is in now. So if you look at the Indian food in Malaysia, it's very different to Indian food in India.
Yeah.
Because mainly South Indian traders or South Indian laborers were taken to Malaysia, and they have created own kind of cuisine by blending with local ingredients and the local influences and the customs. So when you eat something like murtabak, which is a stuffed bread, in India we would call it a paratha, but they call it murtabak because that has got little Arab influences, and then some Malaysian influences have gone in, and they put the raw meat instead of cooked meat, and they break an egg on top of it to fry, because this is more of a Malaysian influence than Indian.
Yeah.
So they make it more protein rich, because that's their protein diet basically. And it has taken into another direction. We would eat it with yogurt. They would make local pickle with a bamboo or chilies and eat with that. And then you go towards Africa or South Africa, for example. In India, we would make our keema and aloo, keema and potatoes, minced lamb and potatoes together. Very famous dish in North India, also in a bit of South India. They have a similar dish in South Africa called babuti. Pretty much similar spices, but slightly more fragrant in terms of they would use maize and bay leaf and all that, which perhaps has come from more Dutch ship coming directly from Indonesia to South Africa, not stopping on the way, or maybe they stopped at Ceylon and picked up more cinnamon and bay leaf and then came down there. And they would make a custard after that, put it on top and bake it. So it's a kind of influence. It's not known in India. You know, we don't need, this is very South African. So wherever I have been and I've taken, you track back one dish and say where it has originated from. It traveled a bit far east, and then it traveled to South Africa, and from there it traveled to the United Kingdom. It has taken very different shape and form now.
Yeah.
Talking about the food, you know, Indian food in the United Kingdom, I'm not talking food in the current time, but just let's go back 50 years ago. People still loved curry. There were a lot of people still migrating from Indian subcontinent to here in form of labor, or the Raj was packing up and they were coming back. And they brought their influences, and they had their own imagination and their own way of cooking things.
Yeah.
And the Indian food which was put on show here was very different to Indian food that was eaten in India.
Yeah.
And over the years, obviously, with the local ingredients have taken in, more and more local ingredients are being taken in now, and more local influences are being taken in. Like chefs like me, I might be in a very current time, I might be a very happening chef. 20 years down the line, somebody else will come and read my story, that what I have done, and say, okay, he absorbed more influences from the United Kingdom and made a cuisine which was called British Indian cuisine, and it's taken a brand new route, which slowly has got nothing to do with Indian food as such, has drawn influences from there, and so it becomes part of British gastronomy.
Yeah.
So that's how I see cuisine. Complex, but
very complex.
I love it.
Yeah, so fascinating. It's a real story that you don't really contemplate until you start to really think it back and, you know, trace its roots. Do you have a kind of single definition of curry that you
I don't.
could use? No.
I don't.
Just key elements like spices.
I think spices are the key elements. You could say there could be a meat or veg, there would be spices, and there would be a sauce. All three combined together, it makes a dish. And if that is the curry, then I would come back and say, how would you define Irish stew?
Yeah.
Because it has got bay leaf, it has got cardamom, it has got black pepper, not cardamom, it has got black pepper, it has got cloves. And how would you break that down, whether that's a curry or not? So when you call word curry, it doesn't mean that there has to be chilies. It could be anything, like korma, for example, hardly sees chili. Uses black pepper, mace, maybe white, instead of black pepper they would use white pepper, and bay leaf, an odd spice like cinnamon just to flavor more.
Mm.
Cream, yogurt and lamb, and boiled onion paste, and it's cooked together till meat is very tender. So that can be termed as a stew in my opinion, because it has got potatoes added towards the end.
Okay.
So how it is very different from Irish stew or Lancashire hot pot.
Yeah.
So it becomes a very vague thing. Then all these things should be termed curry because they all are using spices.
Yeah, it's weird to think that Lancashire hot pot might be.
Exactly. And then
might be
you
okay.
look at Scandinavian meatballs.
Yeah.
They're using bay leaf. They're using cinnamon.
Yeah.
Why them? We are not calling them curries. So
So how did you set the boundaries for your book? Or
there
did-
isn't a
you
boundary.
didn't set it?
It's a boundaryless book.
Okay.
Though I went on more with whatever exists in the hard form of curry at the moment, but this is what I'm questioning through that book. That why those dishes cannot be called curry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
I'm-
sort of
I'm beginning-
open-ended.
Yeah, exactly. It is
Okay.
open-ended. So you never know, there might be curry book 2 from me.
Yeah, I was going
And
to
I'll
say.
be questioning all that.
Absolutely. And did you come away with any favourites, you know, of that you found around the world that you thought actually this is?
Loads. Every place had something to offer, in my opinion. So in Malaysia, for example, in terms of ingredients, I really loved the ginger plant as such. I love ginger, so I'm biased anyway. I love ginger root, the stem, and then I was introduced to the flower of ginger. A beautiful ginger flower. It's a red flower, and you can actually cut the flower and use it in curry. And it gives such a beautiful nutty flavor, which is unique. You won't find it anywhere else in the world. And I just fell in love with that. That's very good, and I intend to use it as and when I can get it in this country. I intend to use it. I've been told that you can grow ginger in your greenhouse. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
So that's one. And in doing Africa, I fell in love with goat meat.
Okay.
Though goat meat is not new to me, I've eaten goat meat all my life, but the use of goat meat, the way they have done it, each and every part of goat has been used, nothing is wasted. Amazing. Fantastic ethos, love it as ingredient. And coming back to United Kingdom, I love the way potatoes are added without any effort. Boom, 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 curry I'm making, there it comes potatoes.
Yeah.
They have used every shape, form of potato.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, and that's fantastic. The local ethos, that's what people like.
Yeah.
Not every time it's naan, not every time they want to reach out for the basmati rice. They want their own good potatoes, and why not? Use
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's what we're,
It's
that's
a
what we're
comfort.
used to, I
It's a
suppose.
comfort food.
Absolutely. And with the talk at Asia House, how did that come about, and what will you be saying?
I think Asia House will be pretty much about what we are talking about, but it will be, of course, with more. I think I'll get more Asian questions, so to speak. People will be specifically asking what were my influences when I was doing Indonesian food, what happened when I tried the Burmese food,
Yeah.
what is the uniqueness about it. I have written a few recipes, seafood recipes, and it's a very bold move, to be honest, on a country like Laos, which is a landlocked space. But what I've done is I've taken inspiration from the spice base and said, you know what, this is a great spice base. You don't only have to use it on beef,
Yeah.
try it on scallops,
Yeah.
chalk and cheese, but you know what,